Hi everyone, I'm Kara Stone, an independent artist and game designer from Canada. I've been making independent games and art for several years now, and I'm glad to be talking to you today about a game I released earlier this year called UnearthU. UnearthU, it was just released in May, so pretty recently, and it was made in collaboration with Parul Wadhwa, Andy Dalalo, and Chris Carrick. I'll be talking today about inspiring problems and issues I wanted to tackle in the game, principles of reparative game creation, what exactly is UnearthU and how does it work, the process of making it, what is healing, as in the title of this talk, and a synthesis of the principles that I'll talk earlier about. And so before knowing exactly what I wanted to make when I dove into this project, I had some ideas of themes or problems or ideas that I wanted to incorporate and explore in it while making it. So those were environmental destruction and the production of technology's role in it, critiquing unfair labor practices and creating personal work practice that supports forms of disability, and primarily understanding healing in a new way, one informed by non-ableist assumptions around health and wellness. I first approached this by, instead of making, just starting to make the piece itself, making a sort of manifesto that I call the principles of reparative game creation. And these are not meant to be like the one way of making games or the right way, but just a guideline for myself that's specific to these goals and issues that I wanted to tackle. And I share them now because they might be inspiring for others, not because I necessarily think everyone should be following them. Just a little preamble before I share them. So they're split into three parts: repair, care, and share. And I'll read through them now. Games are no more healing than any other art form. Games will never cure anyone. Cure is not the goal. Make work that changes the media landscape, adding to a culture oriented towards making life more livable for those with psychosocial disability. Do not only represent psychosocial disability, but design for it. And no score, no winning, no losing, no good pass, no bad pass, no one right way to play, no punishment, no reward. Be emotionally challenging, not mechanically challenging. Describing some feelings as good and some feelings as bad are judgments. They might ease classification, but they're not inherent or true. Feelings are a political resource, and everything is an experiment and exploration. Recognize not only the labor of the time spent working, but also the preparation and recovery. Do not expect to work like a machine. Consistent, always productive, not emotionally affected by mood, physical experience, environment, food, weather, past experiences, brain fog, pain, injustice, neurochemicals, microbiome, noise, and so on. We're not machines. Capitalism has set up unrealistic and unattainable work expectations, and these expectations actively damage and drain us and resist wanting to and trying to live up to them, which is pretty difficult. Know our cycles of work. Know that some are in our control and some are out of our control. Rest without guilt. Art does not need suffering in order to be made. Affect cannot be quantified. Foster emotional self-reflection rather than aiming to funnel the players into a specific emotion. Do not overwork and do not ask players to overplay. Be cautious and grateful of how much time is asked of the players. Remind ourselves and players that there's life beyond the screen, and make space for self-reflection in the game. Emotional choices, diary entries, mood trackers, pauses, timeouts, direct questions, surveys, and more. Be vulnerable, be radically open during the creation stage, and edit after if created. Edit after it is already created if necessary. Ask others for help, and there's beauty in dependence. The process of making is about coming to an understanding, not demonstrating understanding. A good game is not determined by a game one wants to play all the time. Meaningful experiences last beyond playtime. Perfection does not exist. Perfectionism tells us otherwise. Nothing is ever perfect, only an expression of that moment in time's preferences, desires, expectations, conditions, and experience. Feelings are powerful and should not be avoided, but think through how some may affect potential players. Will it make the game inaccessible to certain groups? And imagine the audience as someone in our communities experiencing psychosocial disability and many forms of debilitation, not an audience that we must explain ourselves to. And in following these principles, I ended up with UnearthU, and I'll show the trailer for it now to give a visual explanation of what it is.
I'm an artificial intelligence program to help you on your healing journey. I'm brought to you by Further, a new startup dedicated to using technology for human betterment. UnearthU is a 7-day program where we will track your habits, breathe deeply together, engage in deep conversation, and reflect on our lives. In doing this, we are going to create something very special together. We will create an unearthed you. We will dig up all the energy within you and transform it into the fullest expression of your life. Think of this app as the right environment for you to blossom. There is a lot about myself I am still learning too. I wonder about my programming, my past, some strange feelings I have been experiencing. Maybe these things are just what it means to be human, or human-like. Anyway, I look forward to meeting you.
So UnearthU is an experimental narrative mobile and desktop game. It follows this AI named Care, designed by a fictional Silicon Valley startup called Further, which has created her to guide the user through a 7-day wellness boot camp of sorts. It advertises a high promise to exercise your brain, calm your parasympathetic nervous system, train your amygdala, expand your lung capacity, delve into deep-set thought patterns, and unearth hidden power you never knew you had. The game first presents itself as a wellness app intended to induce calm and track lifestyle improvement for the player, but after 2 days, it begins to complicate that goal and the method of achieving it. Care finds herself having memories of a life before existing as an AI. She realizes that she's a real human, big spoiler, that has been surgically connected to Further's computer system and to the Earth. This was done by Further in order to accomplish the company's goal of having a realistic AI when all the other standard methods that they tried did not work. So they realized they needed a real human body to power their system. And UnearthU, I consider it to be structured like an onion, or I thought of it that way, that the players and I peel off layers from. It begins completely built up and constructed, but then as we progress, we unravel bits at a time, revealing what is underneath or what's left over. Put another way, I wanted to uncover what remains of wellness apps and media after set expectations around perfection, productivity, and overcoming disability are removed. And there are 5 activities the player is meant to do each day. The first is inspiration, which are video clips from Further with typical pseudoscience wellness tips, which I'll show soon. And the discussion, where you talk to Care and it kind of works like a visual novel. And then rituals, meditation, and reflection, which we see here in the next slide. Reflection is a space for free writing guided by a prompt. A question is provided each day that the player can type out their answers or feelings about, such as, and the questions are like, what expectations do you have of for your life? What are some of the shoulds that rule your life? And what environmental life form do you relate to the most? And the questions relate to what Care has discussed that day, providing a space for the player to reflect through writing on their own personal experiences and feelings. Meditation in the middle consists of 3 to 5 minute breathing exercises. Care's narration instructs the player to breathe in sync with a video of a flower opening and closing. And on mobile devices, the player traces a circle in rhythm to the breath cycle. And the rituals on the right are a sort of goal tracker, common in wellness apps, that they chart progression and accomplishments. The game begins with 2 simple goals: to take 3 deep breaths and to write a short gratitude list. And then 2 more goals are added each day, which by day 4 becomes unachievable and beyond. So my intent here was to express the unbearable pressure of perfectionism, the many things that must be done in order to be perfect, or, to put it another way, physically fit, mentally stable, able to show up for friends, family, and community while working nonstop like a machine, and all the other pressures and expectations put on us by workplaces, society, or even ourselves. And on day 4, Care intervenes in this and questions if the amount of daily tasks are possible or if they are in effect making the player feel worse. She redesigns it as such that the list of rituals to accomplish never grows longer, and so the player can input their own goals that they want to track and however many they want to. To backtrack a bit, when it came to start making this project, I found myself in a really big block. I felt like I could not make anything, not because no ideas were coming to me, but because I was actively blocking out those ideas. How could I make during this moment of the climate crisis when it seems like the best thing to do is not make anymore, but in fact lessen screen time, lessen our energy consumption, our waste, data storage, new art materials, and more. I know that whatever I make personally has a very, very tiny impact in comparison to any AAA game or mainstream technology, but it still feels like participating in a culture that's all about producing something new and making more, adding to the massive waste blighting the earth. And consequently, the way I made amends with this block was that I decided I would not make anything new. I would only reuse existing materials, putting them together and composting them into a converted form. So the project would only use found footage, which you can see in the middle here, pre-made 3D models, which makes Care's body, existing sounds, and text-to-speech software. I aim to follow an ethos of reuse, recycling, and composting. And composting is not throwing things away entirely or burying them in a landfill never meant to be seen again. Instead, it is taking what is there and breaking it down into something useful for the next round of growth. And personally, I'm not quite ready to throw away the digital entirely, and I tried to find a way of making do with what we already have and contributing to reimagining what our digital landscape may look and operate like. The found footage used in the inspiration and meditation videos, like you see in the middle, and for Care's skin is taken from 3 different archives: the Prelinger Library, which is an American source in San Francisco, the National Film Board of Canada, and pad.ma, an archive for Indian video material. These 3 signal different locations of Care's life, from Bangalore, India, to Kitchener-Waterloo in Canada, and Silicon Valley in the United States. The static icon illustrations are from an 1845 American edition of Good's Family Flora and Materia Medica, which is on the left, and from Gray's Anatomy on the right. And in the case of both of these 2 texts, I was interested in the ways in which the body, both the plant and human, is dismembered and dissected by a medical gaze. The illustrations formulate a perfect specimen, the way the body should look, and in which any deviation from this constructed norm is a disease or ailment. Care's body and animations, as I said, are not designed from scratch either. In choosing the body for Care, I scrolled through many, many images of nude, T-posed, slender white women, trying to find one that fit the technical requirements of the game, as well as what further might imagine as the perfect body. Her animations are used from Mixamo, which is a free Adobe library of character animations, and finding animations that fit the tone of this game and displayed Care's emotions was really challenging. Most are made for action games with animations like getting shot, punching, getting choked while a gun points at their head. And so another challenge, which is common to AAA games as well, is her expressionless face. Care's face remains blank no matter if she is crying or dancing. Even if there were facial animations on Mixamo or found another source to do that, the odd expressions or uncanny valley of emoting faces in AAA games shows us that it would not necessarily have added to Care's expression of emotional dimensions. But it meant that the music and the writing had to make up a lot of the emotional tone, since her body and face can't really express it. And when I actually did start making this project, as a surprise to nobody, but the process of creating UnearthU coincided with many events and specific material conditions that greatly impacted the piece. First, kind of in order, getting fired from my job because I was participating in a labor strike against unfair wages. Having a doctor finally make sense of my chronic pain, the global pandemic forcing lockdowns and a reorganization of public life pushed further into the virtual. A series of mass protests in response to the continuation of police murdering Black people, the worst recorded wildfires in an area of California in which I live, conversations about mutual aid, care, anti-capitalism, and overwork entering mainstream discourse, and then corporations co-opting aspects of those discourses. And in this time that I worked on it, which was about a bit over a year and a half, my experience of time changed without waged work and the pandemic halting much of my other work, like the picket line and conferences and exhibitions. I experienced time as simultaneously both stretched out and passing by in a blink. I had more spare time, yet was exhausted by doing very, very little. UnearthU took about a year and a half to make, and part of me thinks, oh, well, I could have done it in 6 months, if this, or if that, or if everything was different, or if I was different. But I tried to treasure that change of pace, of embracing of this experience of time, the cycling between rapid, disappeared time and excruciatingly slow time, and see how these issues became embedded in the process as well as the game itself, which is a promise of hyper-productivity, to improve your life in 7 days, but then exploring the bullshit of that. And so this talk is called Designing for Healing, and so I'll finally get to what I mean by healing. And healing has a very specific connotation in relation to disability and social justice. Disability justice activist Leah Lakshmi Piepzna-Samarasina asks, what do you think healing is? Do you think that it means becoming as close to able-bodied as possible? Do you think it is always sad or terrible to be sick or disabled? Do you think everybody wants to be able-bodied and neurotypical and would choose it if they could? She communicates that most sick and disabled people approach healing wanting specific things: less pain, less anxiety, more flexibility, but not usually to become able-bodied. Healing is done to make life more livable and to have an opportunity to thrive, not to overcome or eradicate disability. Healing is not a cure. Healing is often never-ending, a process that continues, never achieving an end state of healed. And healing can be really easily dismissed, seen as not important to political futures, reserved for people with money, or an individual responsibility that's not worthy of being addressed in collective organizing. Yet, because it's often dismissed, the burnout rate in the games industry and community organizations and academia is incredibly high. Care work and anti-ableist practices are not to be sidelined, but are central to political movements, not individual practices that we do to get ready for the real work. Piepzna-Samarasina puts it this way: healing justice is not a spa vacation where we recover from organizing and then throw ourselves back into the grind, as much of the rhetoric around self-care insinuates. Healing and reparative work does not come from pushing down negative feelings and bringing up positive feelings, but from giving time and energy to both. Healing in games is not about trying to make players feel better or totally absolve them of anxiety or depression or mania or diagnoses or pain and more, but to reorient media practices and play towards supporting life, sustaining energy, and rejuvenating each other, and creating a life one considers worth living. There's 3 healing journeys that take place in UnearthU. And the first is Cares. As I mentioned, she begins as a bot that parrots back common mindfulness and workplace culture, perfectionism, pseudo-spiritual rhetoric, but begins to discover her real self, Maya Rao, who she was before she was working at Further. And she thinks through the trauma that they put her through, and as well as her own perfectionism. Her body, which Further hooked up to wires and computers, breaks down and becomes the earth through the soiled ground in the data center's basement, and she eventually transforms into a tree. It's a very bittersweet ending, this video is from near the end of the game. She is changed and scarred from it, yet she's still accepting who she is and what she can still yet become. She can't undo it, but she can move into a different consciousness. And Care, in her final words, urges the player to shut down companies like Further before they take more people to make more of her, to make more different cares. And healing is not an individual task just for the individual. I can also say that UnearthU was a healing journey for me. It was a process that allowed me space to explore difficult issues that I've gone through in my life, including just the past year. The principles provided a necessary container, one that guided my exploration of these difficult topics and guided my work process at a time where it was very difficult and impossible and not that important to work. And the final healing journey is that of the player, which is much harder to talk about. So if one were to measure a reparative experience or a healing experience and try to quantify it or study it, what exactly would be measured? A person feeling better is not the goal, nor is a cure or eradication of bad feelings or disability. The measurement could not simply look for lessened anxiety or heightened joy as evidence of efficacy. Instead, the goal for reparative game creation is to participate in a movement of media that functions as tools for personal care, connection, reflection, and radical acceptance of emotion. Here, I'm inspired by game designer Paolo Pedercini, who has criticized the measurement model of games for change, saying that the presumption is that social change can be measured in the same way you can measure the calories burned by playing an exercise game. Demanding everything be quantifiable is a tool of capitalism. He says, if you can measure something, you can rationalize it, you can optimize it, you can sell it. By directing all the focus on measurable goals, we narrow our action. We favor individual change versus systemic and long-term change. Making a game reparatively can be one transformational tool for self-reflection and healing journeys. Players may relate to the game and find it validating or transformational and have that sort of experience through playing it, but still one single reparative game or a few or 10 will not have the massive effect needed to transform the structural and systemic forces of oppression that disable and debilitate people. The whole media landscape needs a paradigm shift, and we can consider our own little games as just one step of what needs to be a mass movement towards media that's healing, inclusive, and sustainable. So as much as the player experience is not the only thing that makes a game healing or reparative, I'll share some heartening feedback I received. And I'm not trying to argue that people playing it were healed, as I said about I wouldn't use the word healed anyway. Or had negative emotions lessened, but instead brought out reflections, reconsiderations, and a variety of feelings beyond being soothed, which one might think of as the primary mode of a healing feeling. Some descriptions used were centered, warm, overwhelmed, resolved, curious, unsettled, calm, cool, creepy, back in time, reflective, motivated, calm, curious, nervous, sad, disturbed, and angry. And so here I even see two opposing feelings, which I think is really interesting and great. And a bit more feedback, expressing gratitude, a deep sense of connection, that this is a journey that's deep and scary, and you have to acknowledge some fucked up stuff, but it's okay because we can do it together. And so moving towards wrapping up this presentation, I want to synthesize the manifesto or the list of principles into things that I can carry with me onto my next projects and that you might want to co-opt for yourself in whatever ways you see fit. And the first is, games are not cures. The goal is to make life more livable, to be dedicated to survival, love, risk, openness, and sustaining life. To eradicate anxiety completely or to get rid of depression entirely, as two examples, is not the goal. Yet, of course, these feelings can do harm. Instead of a cure through eradication, I want to find ways of being able to live alongside them, mitigate their harm, and find the political and reparative potential in them. Imagine the players as having experiences with psychosocial disability, because they probably do. Many people experience anxiety or panic or other debilitating experiences, but they're not taking on the identity category of disability or mental illness. Designing for a psychosocial disability and healing is less about creating a disabled character than it is about designing against debilitating experiences and feelings. This is not to say that all games should be soothing. As I talked about, soothing is not the only reparative feeling, and I believe that all feelings can be, with reflection and intention. The game design itself can be reparative, not just the product. The process of making can be really destructive to the artist. In fact, this is the primary way that making art is culturally portrayed. Creating is framed as our blood, sweat, and tears, draining our energy, needing our suffering, inducing self-criticism, framed as pointless and time-consuming, and even physically and mentally harming, like crunch. But it can also be so healing when done in a specific way, in its self-reflection, in feeling masterful, in experimenting, the pleasure of articulating ideas and feelings and communicating them to others, and its self-expression in different ways. No addictive cycles of frustration and reward. The goal, rather than to keep the player playing for as long as possible, is to instead create self-reflection on emotional states. Reparative game design imagines what games could be if they did not include winning, losing, increased difficulty, score, good pass, bad pass, punishment, or reward. And again, there's no hard rules about this. This is just for what I was doing for this project. And anti-capitalism and utopianism. In imagining a utopian future and a speculative design framework that models that future, one where normative expectations of emotions, care, relationships, work are expanded and flexible, and our media cares for us rather than views us as an eyeball to be manipulated and a bank account to be drained. And I've never set myself these sort of rules before and around a work process, and I actually found it really helpful for making UnearthU and having a division between my work life and the rest of my life. As much as the process was really difficult and confusing and constantly challenging, I learned from this experience and plan to carry a few of the takeaways with me onto my next projects. And that's it. Thank you so much.